Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to formally welcome everybody today to our Grand National Performance Report. This will be the 5th year in a row we've produced such a report, and we've just been taken aback again this year by the sheer number of people who've expressed interest and have signed up here today representing most of the major betting providers throughout the UK and Europe. And we just want to say we really value your time and we hope you get something out of today's presentation. So I'm going to leave you with the agenda to have a quick glance over while I crack on with some introductions, and I'm going to start with myself. My name is Andy Walker. My role here at Intechnica is I'm the man who connects you as quick as possible to one of our performance experts, and I'll also be doing my best to act as a host today. And I think this is probably now a good opportunity to introduce our performance expert in James Billingham. James, if you'll be so kind to introduce yourself and explain what you do here at Intechnica, and what your role is in today's report.
Yep, sure, Andy. Hear me okay?
I hear you all good.
So I'm James Billingham, a performance architect. So I've worked in performance for over 15 years, working with IBM and in the gaming space for about 3 years with OpenBet. Joined Intechnica about 3 years ago as a performance architect. So I do a whole range of activities for Intechnica with clients, from consulting on performance process, find and fix, helping with APM monitoring, performance test, right the way across all the different services that we provide for performance architects and guide and shape those engagements mainly. In this presentation, I'm going to give a quick overview of the data that we, objective data that we collected for Grand National, and talk a bit about methodology and just a few key insights from the data that we gathered.
Thanks, James. Okay, just a little bit of housekeeping. We will be looking to keep this presentation as close to 40-45 minutes, and there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions towards the end. And we encourage you to do so just simply by using the Messenger tab, which is located on your GoToMeeting widget. Any questions we can't answer, we will answer on an individual basis separate to this presentation at a later date. Okay, well, I'm certainly not going to dive into the reasons why the Grand National poses such a headache within the gambling community. I think it would be fair to say that the fact you're with us today is a sure sign that you're well informed of the challenges the Grand National presents to your mobile and desktop platforms during that day. Our interests really lie in how your organisation is able to handle the spikes throughout the day, be that gracefully or in some cases ungracefully, and the impact that has on customer experience and your ability to retain or attract new customers on that day. Why are Intechnica interested, and why are we so closely associated with the Grand National? I mentioned this is the 5th year of running this. Well, we're interested because we're interested in big business problems, in particular big business problems centered around digital performance. And the Grand National is that for you guys within the betting industry. We have pedigree managing and understanding spikes. Our co-founders, Jeremy and Andy, formed Intechnica 8 years ago on the back of building highly scalable and performant ticketing platforms engineered to handle colossal spikes in traffic in very, very short time frames, with one of them famously being the Glastonbury platform. And this same expertise has seen us help hundreds of organizations now across the globe over the space of 8 years better understand, better manage, and better control performance. Anyway, I hope that gives you a bit of insight into who we are and why we take such a keen interest in the Grand National event. Now I'm going to be moving on to our report, and our report today focuses on 2 forms of analysis, one being subjective, where we have 12 real users to document their experience using one of your mobile apps to place bets at set times, at set user journeys, over the course of Friday and Saturday, and then we compiled the experiences in the form of a league table. Now, granted, this is subjective and it is not the acid test, and due to resources, we were only able to document 12 providers. But what became quite evident was some of our more significant findings in our subjective analysis did marry up with James's raw data. And I think, James, I'm now going to bring you back in just to quickly outline what you'll be doing within your objective analysis today.
Yeah, sure. So previous years, we've produced a lot of data on real devices and cut down the number of providers that we look at. This year, we're trying to produce a more reproducible mechanism that we can use across multiple different industries, so retail as well. And what we're doing is a mixture of simple ping, time to first byte, frequently to back ends, just to see that the site is up, avoiding CDNs ideally, because we want to measure that Akamai is up, and also full page loading times on desktop and emulated mobile, I should make it clear. So one of our improvements for future years is to do real device measurements. So yeah, so we've got time to first byte, full page load inside, and we're going to have a look at analysis of the sizes of the home and key pages. Key pages being horse landing page, football landing page, and the sports home page, and have a look at how people slow down during the period, after the period, and have a look at the slowest versus fastest performing sites and what the spread across the industry is as well, more as a sort of competitive analysis.
Okay, thank you, James. So look, here are some of the samples of the betting platforms we looked at. There were 30 in all. If you can't find your name on here, please drop us a message and we will reply, letting you know whether or not you were included in our report. So when looking to document real user experience, we needed to put ourselves in the shoes of a real user, and it's time to welcome our man Steve. So Steve is 29 years old, and he would be best described as a die-hard Man City fan, and he would fall, as the marketeers like to put it, under the typical millennium who runs his life from the phone in his pocket. Now Steve has 3 registered betting apps, 2 are dormant and 1 he actively uses when he places bets. And unlike Chantel, who'll throw you £3 once a year, a wonderful charm, whilst in Wetherspoons watching the Grand National, Steve will religiously spend his 20 every match day following his beloved City. Okay, so from a business point of view, and this is why it matters, Steve represents actually a revenue stream which spans over 38 games a season, and it doesn't take a lot of Steves within your customer base to prop up a significant amount of revenue. And the harsh reality is Steve is literally only one or a couple of clicks away from moving his interest and his money into any other betting provider in the marketplace. And when we talk about genuine risks associated with mismanaging performance over the Grand National weekend, it is Steve who could represent your biggest win or your biggest loss, both in the short term and in the long term. So we needed to give Steve a device, or a volunteer, so to speak, which was an iPhone 7. We then asked Steve to follow a mapped out user journey, which included both the horse racing and the football. I'm going to leave it on here for you a second just to take that in. We then set betting times, which were based around the Saturday football fixtures and the Aintree races, and we did this. We had basically 6 check-ins throughout the day. We tended to want to check in just before the televised football matches kicked off, because that's when you guys will be doing your heavy advertisement. So again, just trying to apply a little bit of logic here when we think about our check-in points. So in order to understand the fluctuation the Grand National experience has, we needed to benchmark the user experience, and that was explained in the rationale. We did this on the Friday, the day before the event. And what you can see here is everything in green and yellow represents a relatively good user experience, with green being sub-second response times. So at this point on the Friday, there were no obvious contenders for slowdown on your mobile providers that we tested. But that was a slightly different story come Saturday. And what was really interesting was there were some providers that demonstrated no noticeable or very little change in user experience, and some of the top providers carried on serving sub-second response times throughout our checkout points. The majority sat in the middle half of the table, again just only showing small signs of strain, but managing to maintain a relatively good user experience. Certainly nothing that would suggest risk losing Steve. The problem started to rise at the bottom half of the table, especially the bottom 3, where we started to document poor user experiences. We started to evidence apps crashing, error messages appearing, and significant amounts of lag. There was one provider we've highlighted in red. In terms of Premier League, these guys will be relegated by Christmas. We couldn't use them when we couldn't place a bet. So bringing Steve back into this, you could argue from our subjective analysis, the majority of our providers looked after Steve's experience pretty well and placed themselves in a strong position to attract and hold on to new Steves who were switching from providers that fell short during the day. But just to reiterate, the purpose of this subjective analysis is just to give James's technical insight a little bit more meaning and relevance. And I think, James, it's time I probably hand over to you to go through your performance report from an objective point of view now.
Sure, I'll just get off mute. Yeah, so as opposed to the subjective monitoring where it was a limited number of mobile apps, the more objective, the timed and controlled end user, or well, synthetic monitoring that we're doing with over 30 websites, and across those we try to monitor multiple pages. Obviously all providers, we can't necessarily get to their horse and football page without having an account to log it in, which wasn't necessarily possible in the time we had. But as much as we could, we tried to get everybody's home page, not a splash page, there's no point monitoring splash pages. Tried to get their horse homepage and their football homepage and actually monitor those for ping to the back end if they're a different domain, and also for full page load times on Chrome, and also emulated desktop, emulated mobile rather, using Chrome. So what we've got is a mixture of time to first byte times, which give us outages, give us slowdown for the back end, and also the page rendering times and page weights for all of these different pages. So we'll quickly go through a subset of this data, and it's useful to point out this is a subset. We collected something like 100,000 measurements for this, which is the back-end ping, and 10 million or more actual elements downloads for the full page load stuff that we did. So there's a lot of data stored at the back end, so we can slice and dice this in any way we want. And we're certainly going to be interested in any feedback you've got on things you'd be interested in for future presentations, and also, if you want to talk to us individually and anonymize your data out of this and go through it, then obviously we'll also try and get any custom data out that you're interested in. So this messy graph shows the day, Grand National Day. The main thing to look at is not necessarily the detail, but the big spike in the middle where the three clustered fairly big deviations is the actual kickoff for Grand National. So there were three fairly big providers who had a big slowdown that did correlate with some of Andy's measurements. And then also there's another smaller spike you can see underneath where a fourth person had a bit of a slowdown actually on the kickoff. And then after that there's the purple spike, which again appears a little bit further on. That was somebody who seemed to have some trouble after the event, either settlement or people coming in checking to see their winnings, etc., caused a problem rather than actually having a problem at the time. Now, from our point of view, it was very interesting because previously when we've monitored this, we're counting how many people have gone down, how many people have had significant outages, returning error pages, returning broken pages. We saw considerably less of that this time. There really was more people who slowed down, and it took a very long time for the pages to respond than it did for people to actually return errors and broken pages. So from our point of view, it's interesting that things have moved rather than like who goes down. It's who's provided the best customer experience during the time. So moving on, why is this important in terms of customer experience? So just to quickly go through, probably most of you are aware of studies like the Amazon study that showed that conversion goes up for every 100, 200 milliseconds. I can't remember exactly what the figure was of time. Certainly this is the best study we've seen. I recommend you have a look at Faster FT.com on their FT blog, where they actually purposely slowed down their site to see people registering, what effect it has. Quite a brave decision to make from the business side of things, because they prove that by purposely slowing people down, all other variables removed in terms of user experience, that there's a direct correlation between both conversion rate and engagement. How many pages session people will go to with slower pages, whether they come back as well. And if you look at that blog, they're also able to give a monetary value to what the cost is of their pages being 5 seconds slower, for example. Back in that graph above, some of those deviations are like 20 seconds, that's just for time to first byte. So people are getting a horrendous experience during that period for those providers. The question is, what does that actually mean in terms of lost business? Does it mean anything in terms of lost business? The way you can measure that is obviously by having real user monitoring in place. We certainly recommend that. The monitoring we've done is synthetic. We can't actually get access to your real data. So we recommend that you replicate this and understand this for your own users. Very important from a business point of view. And performance, this is this is ft.com on newspapers. We've done a lot of this with retail people. In the gambling industry, it's a slightly different equation, that when you have somebody signed up and they've got a wallet, they've got some money in there, they've got some free bets, they're probably going to use that. But as Andy was saying, do they stay with you? Do they move off? Have you got statistics of how many people were ephemeral users and came into the site just for Grand National and then subsequently got converted into longer-term users of your system? How many people experienced a terrible performance during Grand National, and then when they were previously consistent users, they stopped being consistent users? Can you actually measure that, and can you give a figure on that? We find this is a very, very powerful method for promoting performance in the organisation, which is good for us as a performance consultancy, but also it's good for you because you can work out where in your funnel is the important stages, where if people get a bad experience, do they not tolerate that? And there are areas where people are more likely to tolerate bad performance than others, and you really want to focus your performance engineering on the areas that are going to give you the best return, and the only way you can know that is by having the data. So moving on to lessons learned. So yeah, I've already said, we saw definitely less outages. And I say it's definitely Grand National is going to be interesting for the next one. It's I think it's more who can give the best performance in terms of user experience, not necessarily who doesn't go down anymore. What is the impact on that slowdown? Can you actually quantify that? So we can see it's very clear that even some of the providers who perform very well, the 95th, 99th percentiles, people start experiencing worse and worse performance as the websites get stressed and as the back end gets stressed. Again, that mixed experience for a small percentage of your customers. If it's your high value customers, are they leaving? Is that impacting them? Do you have the data to be able to answer that question? We see more and more in the retail space, people are using, we have a product traffic defender which throttles and queues people. Gambling industry, typically Grand National, a lot of these people that come in don't make you any money unless they actually stay and become regular customers. We know certainly people are looking at offering those, giving different experience, having VIP experience for people who are regular high-value customers. You guys do that regularly, but do you actually have figures on what is the impact on giving the other part of your customer base a bad experience? What is the retention? What is the attrition loss there? What is the likelihood of them being converted into a high-value customer? We certainly say that real user monitoring is essential for that. If you want to be able to get that data, and some user monitoring tools are better than others in terms of, you really want every bit of data, and you want to be able to correlate things like basket value in retail or betting value in the gambling industry to the likelihood of them coming back or not. So moving on to some of the other data that we collected. As I say, we collected page size. So it's a very simple metric, how large, how much data has to be transferred for the onload of the particular page. And it's very interesting to us to see, how much of a distribution there was. And what you can't see is the actual providers in here. There's more than the 30 or so provider bars here. That's because we've got multiple pages for each betting provider. It's interesting, even within the same provider, quite often there's a vast disparity between, say, their horse page and their football page. But that's just because different teams manage it, and content management teams are pushing dodgy images out that are way too big for one page and not for the other. I don't know, but it's interesting to see the massive disparity between the largest pages and the smallest ones. The very smallest down there is a splash page, which I would ignore. But other than that, the best size of pages for fully featured sports homepage or horse or football page was 400 kilobytes, and the very largest, including all the third parties and images, was 6.5 megabytes. That's definitely is typically a direct correlation between page size and page download time. So if you can get down nearer to that smaller size, you're in the position of competitive advantage in terms of correlation, as we demonstrated previously. So same again for mobile homepage size on the next slide. Again, it's interesting because we do this for retail as well, and a lot of retailers don't actually have optimized mobile pages. Actually, a couple of caveats here. If you've got a native app, this isn't included. This is just mobile web. So if you're somebody who wraps your mobile web page into your native app, then you will be included here and it will be valid. If you have a mobile web page that is very lightly used, then this data won't be particularly relevant to you. Now, there is one there with a very large outlier, which is interesting because that appeared to be some erroneous or anerroneous image that wasn't compressed and ended up being released onto that site and given a significantly worse user experience for that particular mobile operator. Right the way down to, again, some very highly optimized pages at around 300 kilobytes. And again, a very big spread. There's obviously a lot of competitive advantages to be had here, from the worst pages to the best pages. So moving on. So lessons learned. So say there weren't actually that many pages that had bugs in there. We certainly found a couple where images and other things were not optimized. So what we say is, no, it's perfectly understandable when bugs get into production, although possibly not during Grand National when it's such a focus on it. But what you should do is be monitoring and have NFRs and alerting on these metrics. It's very easy to automate some of this web page test stuff and actually produce alerts so something gets pushed out to a test environment where an image is not optimized, or you've got way too large a JavaScript or something like that. Actually have NFRs on these and alerts on them and don't allow it to get into production. But at the very least, if it does get into production, you should know straight away and get it out and make sure that on a day like Grand National, you've not, content management team haven't accidentally pushed an image out that is completely not optimized. And we usually say, do not treat mobile as second-class citizens. But again, that really depends. You need to benchmark against your competitors. Do you know what your competitive advantage is? Is it actually a business case for having an optimized mobile experience? I think probably in the betting industry it is, because so many people, more and more people are moving to mobile and away from desktop. But if you can actually measure what the effect the smaller page rate has on your conversion and customer experience, and also be able to split out mobile users and different devices and see how they behave and what effect the render time and download time has, then you've got a very good business case for actually investing in improving that. So moving on to actual render times or download times, this is actually on load time. I'll give a few caveats here. Again, we're just giving some very basic statistics here. On load time, DOM ready time, page usable time, complete page load time. There are millions of different measurements that you can use. You could even put in your own custom tag with a lot of run tools and actually make sure that you're measuring the point at which everything above the fold is loaded and ready for people to use. So there are multiple different measurements you can do. And also as well, this is, bear in mind, this is synthetic monitoring. And any synthetic monitoring that you have, you've got to be very aware that you need to understand what the conditions of your synthetic monitoring are. We're testing from one location. It's not multiple locations. It's not real devices. So really, these figures are not authoritative. Don't saying 28 seconds to 4 seconds. Really, it's the spread. Again, unlike page size, where that's a hard figure, this is very much dependent on network conditions, on whereabouts you are, what CDNs are able to deliver quickly to the location that you're testing from. So you need to be very aware of that, and really what we're trying to get across here is that in your industry there is a massive difference between the largest and the smallest in terms of desktop homepage load time, which there is. 28 seconds to 4 seconds, that is a massive competitive advantage for the people who are down the bottom, and potentially not at all a good experience or competitive advantage for people at the top. Liable to be losing customers there. So again, moving on to mobile, it's really the same story. Obviously it's interesting for us. Again, you've got obviously mobile optimized pages. You can see the outlier again there. That actual erroneous image, I think it was, didn't have quite such an effect on page load time. But again, it could well be that that image was in a CDN that was particularly fast to our testing location, so taken with a pinch of salt. But again, there's a very large distribution for page size. Page loads are very fast at 2 seconds is definitely best practice, right the way up to the slowest, which on the mobile, 18 seconds for full page load time is not ideal. But again, that 18 seconds, if your page is ready and people can start using it in 5 seconds, that 18 seconds isn't necessarily that bad. You really need to understand your page load times and what metric is actually important to you and actually drives your customers to abandon or to convert or not, as the case may be. So moving forward. And to lessons learned. Not loading for me. Is it loading for you guys?
James, we've got it loaded here. I'll give it a second.
It's just me then. As long as you've seen lessons there, I'll look at it on my own, in front of me rather than via the webinar. So yeah. Sorry, not lessons learned. Yeah. So yeah, it's scope for optimization. So yeah. So what we've done is as well as looking at the size and the loading time, we've just applied a couple of incredibly simple optimizations. So basically the two most basic optimizations that you can do when you're doing front-end optimization. One which is gzip, turn on gzip. Any modern web server should really have it on by default. Well, it's quite surprising looking at retailers when we did this, where we included it in the retailer one for Black Friday. But then also you guys as well, quite a lot of third parties and some people even on their primary domain don't have gzip turned on. And you can see there are 3 pages of actually the same provider where 2 megabytes of download time on desktop out of a maximum of 6 or so or on those figures could actually be completely removed just by turning on or flipping the switch on your web server and saying, deliver this over gzip rather than uncompressed. So, things like that, you should make sure you've got turned on. You have a checklist for optimization and make sure you've ticked off even the simple ones like that. And again, for image potential for optimization, these sort of things can be automated in your build pipeline. You can there are open source tools that will optimize images and produce you a lossless conversion, reduce down the image down to in theory, the same fidelity as the original. You need to be careful with that because depending on what devices you're on, some people obviously have a subjective view of what is lossless and what isn't lossless. It's definitely worth reviewing it, but you can, this is not at all an aggressive optimization that we've chosen here. And again, there were multiple megabytes. The biggest one there was 2 megabytes that can be shaved off the page size just from optimizing the images on that page, right the way down to quite a long tail, which is down to like 200K or so, which again is going to be hundreds of milliseconds, which is it's all competitive advantage, and it's always a danger that the content management team is able to push out whatever they like to the page, that they can mess up your front end time and mess up your competitive advantage very easily if you're not checking on that, and you ideally have got automated processes to push that in place. Same again for mobile. Again, gzip again, same provider had a problem with gzip and 2 megabytes that was not being compressed. And again, for images, although images, again, people obviously, in your industry are spending time on optimizing mobile. There was certainly less unoptimized images in mobile. Again, some few outliers, but mostly it was a lot of third parties where it's difficult to actually make sure their images are optimized. So moving on to lessons learned from this. And, it's worth remembering, this is very simple stuff. Simple optimization can have a large effect. There is a direct correlation between page size and page load, which again has a knock-on effect on conversion and customer experience. Obviously, we've given you the 2 most simple ones. If we're doing front-end optimization for people, those are one of the 2 that we'll kick off. Obviously, JS minification third-party tags, potentially consolidation of your JavaScript and CSS, although obviously the caveat to that is HTTP2. If you're using HTTP2, you probably want to do the opposite and not consolidate your JS and CSS files. A bit too much to get into now. But it's interesting with this test that we did, around about 30% of all the requests across all these providers were HTTP2 across CDNs and primary domains. Be interested to see how much that is next year. I suspect the vast majority of people would have migrated to HTTP2 by next Grand National. And there's a large scope for increased conversion. Speed is a competitive advantage. And it's proven time and time again that faster pages equals better conversion and engagement. And from our point of view, looking at Grand National over the years, it's been previously, who doesn't go down gets the competitive advantage. And now it seems to be much more, who is faster has got the competitive advantage, who's given the best customer experience has got that competitive advantage. So we definitely recommend that you, use your own synthetic monitoring, better than ours, to be honest. We did it across lots of pages, lots of different providers to give an overview. Really, you should be doing it from multiple locations, real devices ideally again, and also have the actual real raw data, real user monitoring. You can't compare, anything you can get from synthetic, you can get from real user monitoring, and what experience your actual customers are getting across your different devices and different desktop experiences. So yeah, that's it from the lessons learned side of things.
Thanks, James, and you apologise with a few technical glitches there. So if some of the slides were moving forwards and backwards, I hope that didn't affect the presentation. We're going to get through some people's questions now. James, I have the first question from Steve, and it was basically, how do you define good load time? What is good enough?
Yes, that's a very good question. Ideally, it's a question that you've worked out by benchmarking against your competitors. Just see, certainly an analogy to the retail space. If you're a high-end jeweler, your page size could be very large, and you've got to compare that like with like. So what sector are you going to? You're pretty much all in the same sector, less of a problem. But certainly benchmarking against your competitors and see where you fit against your competitors. Because if your competitors are worse than you, you probably don't need to invest a vast amount of money in being sub-second, for instance. And then also being able to correlate where in the business critical journeys where people that might abandon, where they might decide not to come back. What is it that actually causes them to not come back? And so analyses in the retail space have shown that people get into the checkout journey as they get further and further down that funnel, they're less and less likely to abandon for obvious reasons. So you can correlate certain pages and bad performance on certain elements, like placing a bet, for example, or adding to your slip. If people consistently get a bad experience in some of those sort of actions, then they're probably more likely to abandon and not to come back than they are if they just get a bad experience when they're submitting payment or something that they might expect to take longer. They've already placed it. As long as that actually goes through, they won't mind. But yeah, really, it's a it depends question. And also, again, in terms of what actual measurements you're looking at in real user monitoring. Again, there are myriad different measurements for page load time. And again, we recommend that you actually spend time analysing that and finding out what actually correlates to abandonment for your customers, because it really does depend on the website.
Yeah, I've got another one here, James. It's what tool did you use to monitor these times? I think that was within your objective analysis.
Yeah, so the back-end ping time was fairly custom open source tool was used just to do a back-end ping, so that we could actually have complete control over that and the data that's returned. The full page load times, Web Page Test is a very good free tool which we used. There are commercial versions of that. SpeedCurve is quite nice if you want a UI, but again, we want to get hold of the raw data from that and put it into our own data analysis engine, JSON data that you can pull out of there. So there is quite a nice API there if you've got a technical team and the time to do it, where you can automate tests using Web Page Test, either your own private instance. We had our own private instance I set up, or even submitting tests to the public instances. and now they actually have started adding real devices to those public instances, which is quite nice. But again, if you've got the time and the money, and it's certainly worth investing in it, you can actually plug in your own real devices and run your own tests against that. The best practice from our point of view is to build that into your build pipeline, run tests against test environments, run tests continuously against production, and be alerting and monitoring on that. What actual tool you use doesn't matter. We use open source tools, and it takes a certain amount of time and technical skill to do that, because we want to get the raw data and be able to analyze it ourselves. For you, commercially, it may or may not be worth your while doing that. There's certainly plenty of tools out there that will give you the vast majority of the data you need, and we're certainly very happy to talk to people about tool selection.
Yeah, I think that kind of, I don't know if that answered the next one, but it was basically, what real measurement tools do you recommend? Was that being answered there, James?
Well, yeah, so there's one thing to note. Some of the real measurement tools do aggregate. You need to be careful of that, if you want to answer some of these business questions and correlate conversion, etc., to business outcomes to performance. If you haven't got every single session and you haven't got every single measurement, then it's very hard to do that, if not impossible. When we have done that with clients, we've used tools that allow you to store every single measurement. So make sure that your tool that you're looking at does give you that capability, and ask your tool provider, if you're engaging with them, salespeople, to actually run you through how you can actually monetize performance and give a figure to performance loss from your data, and make sure they can actually meet that barrier before you actually go ahead and sign up to use that real user monitoring tool. So it is a very big data analysis problem, certainly for gambling companies. We've seen a lot of the monitoring tools, APM tools, struggle under the vast amount of load that you guys get. So you do very much need to consider performance, not only of your system, but unfortunately performance of the tools that you're using, which seems a bit silly, but really the vast amount of data that you'll be generating by collecting every single request that people make across all of your different games and systems is a lot of data, and even some of the commercial tool vendors, their tools can't handle that without aggregating. So you need to make sure that you ask them the right questions.
Okay, I've got a few more here. One is, what measurements on the front end are most relevant? I think it's load time, DOM, ready, etc.
Yes, as I say, it does depend, because very much so some of these measurement we had there was on load time, which is obviously a critical one. That's when your spinny bar on the desktop, it shows the page loading. That's when it stops showing it loading. Anything that occurs after that is asynchronous. May well change the page, but from a user experience point of view, the browser appears to have stopped spinning and saying that the page is loading. So that can be a useful one regardless. But if you do have web page testers, it's introduced this beta thing of page available, page ready. Constantly people are trying to come up with new measurements and new ways of measuring, what is the valid point at which, from a user experience point of view, people are happy. It can be when if the page is blocked and you can't actually interact with it. DOM interactive is obviously a critical one, so it's certainly worth looking at some of these other measurements and see, is your DOM interactive at literally milliseconds before you're on load, for example, something ridiculous like that, then that would be a problem. But really, again, also the answer is, it depends. You just look at your system and see where people abandon and what sort of experience correlates to that.
Yeah, I mean, I've got another question. I think this is directed actually towards more subjective analysis. It said, did you measure time to place a bet or latency in bet placement? I think the best way to answer that is we measured the time it took to go through the user journey and documented that experience. So we'll answer that question, I think, more on an individual basis. And I think that comes up to the last couple of questions here, which is all the same, saying, where do we fit in terms of the report, and how do we get our results? And that kind of measures up with our next steps. And if you did want to find out where you fit in terms of the gambling industry, we'll be running individual sessions and meetings, which is a bit more of a one-on-one with me and James, and we'll go through your results in a bespoke report. Yeah, we look forward to having them kind of conversations. And James, I'd just like to say I really appreciate your time. Thank you for going through the report today with us all. and I hope everyone has found it useful. We will be contacting everybody after this webinar to get some feedback, but if you have any questions, please don't hesitate. Send us an email. I've left my details here personally if you want to get in touch with me, and we look forward to speaking to you very soon. So I hope everyone has a good rest of the day. I think we've done quite well in time. I think we're about 45 minutes, which is what we planned. So James, thank you very much. Take care, and thank you everyone else for being here. I hope you've taken something from us and you've enjoyed it. Have a good day. Bye.
Cheers, Andy.